Hi, I'm Jamie from Not So Wimpy Teacher, and I'm really excited to be here for the next video in my series about how to teach writing. I hope that these videos have given you some tips, some ideas, some things to think about as you plan your writing instruction. If you haven't watched the other videos in the series, I highly recommend doing so. I started off with a video about what writing workshop is and some tips for fitting it into your schedule. Then I talked about writing mini lessons and how to keep those mini, tools to use in those mini lessons. I talked about lots of different ways to use the mentor text in your lessons. And I did a video all about the student independent time and the writing notebook. Today we're talking about writing conferences. And if you're anything like me, writing conferences are something that is a little bit stressful. They're kind of hard to fit in. How are you supposed to do it all? I get it. I've been there. So this is kind of what it looked like in my classroom. I told my kids to go write, and some were, some weren't. I was trying to have a conference with a kid. I couldn't read their writing. I didn't really know what to say to the kid about their writing. And it got to the point where I was realizing I was conferencing with kids, I would conference with one kid maybe once every 4 months. So I wasn't really able to give them everything that they needed from the conference. When I realized that was definitely not going to work, I tried a lot of different things, and I think I've come up with some solutions. Writing conferences may always be a little bit challenging, but I think if you take some of these ideas and implement them, that it's going to be so much less stressful and more meaningful to your students. So I hope these will help you out. Here we go. Let's start off with the basics of why should you be conferencing, because I've been asked that a few times. You're giving a mini lesson to the whole group. You're giving a task for the whole group. The conference time is your time to differentiate and help meet the individual student needs in your classroom, because no one has a classroom of students that are all at exactly the same level with exactly the same needs. None of us. We have students who are well below grade level. We have students maybe who are above grade level. We have students who are maybe on grade level but struggle with this or that. And another student on grade level does really well with those but not these. They're all so different. Writing conferences give you the opportunity to see what they're working on and offer them some guidance, maybe offer them a push if they need it, maybe answer questions they might have had but were not ready to ask in front of the whole class. Maybe it's a chance to give them a goal, something to work on, okay? So conferencing really is very important. Think about how you use small groups in reading and math. It's the same idea in writing, that our kids all have such different needs, and so by conferencing with them about their writing, we're able to help them individually. Of course, we have a lot of students, and that's where it gets tricky. When in the world am I going to conference with all these students? Well, writing conferences happen while your students are doing their independent writing. And I talked about in that last video about how important it was going to be for training students and making sure they had lots of endurance for the writing. The biggest reason we're going to need to do that is because we are not going to be able to hover over them while they are writing, telling them, get to work, keep writing, stop talking. We can't. We are going to be conferencing with our students, and that conference time is incredibly valuable, so we have to make sure that we're not being interrupted a lot. And I have a video coming at the end of the series about that first week of school and how we are going to train our students. But if we do a really good job training, we take our time training them, making them stronger writers, then conferences will be possible. You won't be able to start conferencing with your students the first week or two of school, because that's the time when you're getting them used to the routine and the procedures. But hopefully, a couple of weeks into your first unit, you'll be able to start your conferences. And you may have to keep your conferences a little bit short for the first couple of weeks, but I know that you're going to work with your students on their endurance, and that conference time is going to get longer and more valuable for everybody, okay? All right. It was the aha moment for me. This is when it all clicked. I cannot meet with students individually. This is what I was trying to do. I was like, all right, I'm going to meet with these 4 students today. So I'll meet with Joey and then Katie, and then what would happen would be like Joey would take all my time and I would never get to all 4 students. And so then the next day I'm like, all right, now I'll start with Katie. And I wasn't getting it done. Okay. So I got thinking about it. In reading and math, when I'm differentiating, I use small groups. I can do the same thing with writing. It doesn't have to be an individual conference. It can be a small group. The key is that I want my small groups to have similar needs. They won't be identical, just as if you think about your reading groups, even your low-level reading group probably has some differences. Maybe you have some students who really struggle with phonics and some students really struggling with sight words, but they're still in that lower group because they need the extra support during reading. It'll be a little bit that way with your writing groups too. But here's what you're going to do. We've talked about this before, but at the beginning of a unit, you are going to do an on-demand writing sample. My writing units have that written right into the lesson plans for you, but basically you're going to give them a prompt, or at least an area to write in. Maybe write a personal narrative about a time that you got hurt or were sick. Give them some choice within that, but because you're going to write it in just one day, they don't have time to have to generate a topic. So they're going to work on the writing sample, and you are going to use your rubric to grade that sample. You are not going to put the grade in the report card. It's like a pretest. So it's not a grade you're going to put on their grade book, but it's so valuable for you and your students. I always share this rubric with my students and ask them to set a goal or 2 for themselves, and that's part of it's in my writing units as well. But the rubric's so valuable for me too. I'm able to take those rubrics and kind of set them into piles. Like, oh, the following students did not even know what a personal narrative was. It's way off. They need help with sentences, okay? I got that group. And then maybe I've got a group who's like, all right, they wrote a story. It's just really lacking on all the detail. It's short and just, it doesn't elaborate. Maybe that's going to be a pile. Your piles are going to be different depending on your kids. You're going to kind of have to read them and kind of put them into piles of like, oh, all of these kids wrote the end. They really need work on those conclusions. But you're just going to kind of level them maybe. That the following, just based on what you're reading. It doesn't have to be scientific, guys. They're going to get much more individualized instruction during this group no matter what. Okay? So don't get yourself all stressed out over it. You're going to want as many piles as days of the week that you do your writing workshop. For me, I did it 4 days a week, so I needed to have 4 piles, 4 conference groups. Okay? And you know what? The other reason not to stress out over it is if you have to switch someone out of one conference group and into another, it's easy. So it's a good starting point, but if you got to move someone around, not hard. Now what I do is I actually have a poster for each day of the week that I do writing workshop. If you do it all 5 days, then you would want to also add in a Friday, and you'd want 5 groups, so you'd want 5 piles, basically. And I laminate these, and then I use dry erase marker to write the names of the students in that group. So maybe I take one of my piles, and I say this is me, my Monday group, and I write those names down. Take my next pile, and maybe these are the kiddos who are like, they wrote a personal narrative, I guess. Maybe they're my Tuesday group, and I'm going to go ahead and write their names down, etc. Maybe all the way up until my last group is sort of like, wow, I'm pretty impressed. These are my writers. And maybe they're going to be my last group I meet with. Or, I don't know about you, but actually I like to meet with my higher groups on Monday because I tend to not be as awake on Monday, and I feel like my higher groups inspire me. But maybe you are tired by Friday and you need that inspiration the last day of the week. You know what you are, but it's not that important how you order them. But you're making groups that are fairly similar in size. You really don't want one group with 16 kids and one group with 2 kids because it's not a small group anymore. And then people are going to ask me, well, how many kids should be in my group? Well, it's going to depend on the size of your class and the number of days that you do writing workshop more than anything. But you're going to want to try to make them small groups, okay? All right, so now you have groups of kids with similar-ish writing needs. And you only need to meet with one group each day. This is manageable. You can meet with one group while your kids are writing. They're independently writing for 20 to 30 minutes. If you can meet with your conferencing group for 15 to 20 minutes, and then you still have a few minutes to walk around and support your kiddos who might need it, you can do this, right? Let me get you a few tips about how you're going to make this conference work. Of course, you're going to have your schedule. You're going to meet with each group once a week, basically. I mean, you're going to have some weeks where you don't have school Wednesday, so you didn't meet with your Wednesday group. It's okay. Meet with them next week on Wednesday. Don't stress out over it. It's okay. But you're going to have this regular schedule. Your students are going to know. You can post these on a wall, a cabinet, a bulletin board, and your students know that I am the Monday group. I will get a question like, well, if you're meeting with the group, how are they doing their independent work? And that's a valuable question to ask because it does get in the way of them doing their independent task you've just given them. First of all, my conferences didn't always last the entire independent time. Maybe sometimes they did. But I liked to give myself 5 to 10 minutes to walk around and support kids if possible. So they may still get a little bit of independent time and they still may be able to start their task. But if not, the next day they can go ahead and do 2 tasks usually. They're not the tasks that I'm giving my students to complete. And if you're not following this part, then make sure that you've watched the previous video about the independent writing time. But the tasks I'm asking my kids to complete do not take the entire writing time, almost never. And so the next day they can usually finish both tasks. It's not usually that pressing. The other thing is during that conference time, if you wanted to, you could actually be talking about the lesson you've just given and actually be supporting them through completing that task. If that's something you think that group would value, they would grow from. So maybe you did tell them to work on the lead. And so right there in conferences, you're going to ask them to all write 2 different leads and choose a good one. Choose which one they like the best. And you're going to help support them through that. That's a possible conference. It doesn't have to be how your conferences are every time, but maybe if you know this group really did struggle with leads, so you really want to make sure they're going to write a good lead, that could be a great conference. You're there to provide support, and they need that. All right, so you've got this nice regular schedule, but you're still going to have to keep them short. You're not going to have a ton of time, and as teachers, we love to talk. And we could have a conference for 30 minutes with these groups. It's so much fun. Now, what I used to do during conferences that totally did not work, here's what would happen. I'm conferencing with one student, by the way, so that already didn't work because and I had like 24 different conferences to do. And I'm reading their writing. I can't really read it. I'm struggling to get through the whole thing in this short period of time. And then I'm struggling. I want to give them like one goal, right? This was just so long. Here's what I decided worked better. Focus on just one skill. So for example, I'm meeting with my conference group today, and I know that yesterday we worked on adding dialogue to our writing. So I think today I want to check in with them because dialogue's just tricky in all my groups. Probably need some support there, even my higher group, okay? So I decided, today during conferences, I want to check in on my kids and see how they're doing with dialogue. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell my students to read one paragraph where they have used dialogue, a paragraph they're proud of that included dialogue. Right away, I've saved so much time. I'm going to be able to go student to student to student very quickly, and they are reading their piece to me, so I do not have to decipher their handwriting. I am not asking them to read the whole piece. I'm only focusing in on one skill that we have already discussed in our whole group mini lessons and that they've already had a little time to work on independently. Now, dialogue, I might also want to know if they punctuated it correctly, and that's fine. I can have them write on a whiteboard. I can give them one sentence and ask them to punctuate it correctly on the whiteboard, just to see, can they do it? If they can't do the one sentence right on the whiteboard, I know they probably didn't punctuate correctly in their work, and I can help support them then by helping to show them where errors might be and encouraging them to go back to their work and make sure they didn't make that error in their writing, okay? But I'm only focusing on dialogue. I'm only asking them to share one place that they had that dialogue. It goes fast. I can go from kid to kid very quickly, all right? As you meet with conference groups for longer and you might have a little extra time, you might be able to tell them, hey, I want to go around and have you give give one person in this group a compliment about their work. That's fun too. That gets the kids really involved in helping their peers. But that's probably something you won't do right at the beginning. You want them to model you complimenting and supporting the group, and then they'll start to sound like you later in the year, and that's really fun. But the key, focus on just one skill. And how you're going to choose this skill, it can be done in a couple of different ways. Again, this doesn't have to be super scientific. You know your kids. Trust yourself. One way I would choose a skill is based on those rubrics at the beginning. Maybe you had a group that you were like, whoa, they never use paragraphs. Wow, we really need to work on that. So you're probably going to want a conference with that particular group about paragraphs once or twice, just because you know that was a struggle for them. And you want to check in and make sure that after the mini lesson, they've grown. The other way to choose a skill is simply choosing a skill that you've recently covered in your mini lessons, whether it was just a few days ago, yesterday, or even like I said, you might be talking about the lesson from today if you really want to, make sure that they're getting support on that particular skill. So choose a skill that you already know they need or one that you've already covered in mini lessons. Have them read just a small portion. Please read to me your lead. Boom, 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 boom. What do you guys notice about these leads? Who used a different type of lead? Who used a question? Who used a fact? All right. Who's feeling like they need some help making their lead even more interesting? All right. Why don't we help Joey with his lead? Read it again to us. All right. I like how you did this. I wonder if it'd be more interesting if you also did this. Boom. Does anyone else need some help with their lead? Does anyone else feel like they want to make it stronger? Who's happy with their lead? And when you feel like everyone in that group has a pretty strong lead, send them back to their desks and they can get to work on whatever skill they should be working on that day or their other stories. Okay? Have them do the reading, make it one short piece of their writing, and just one skill that you're focused on. Don't try to focus on how to be a good writer in every conference. Just pick one tiny skill. Got it? All right, guys. My next video, I hope you'll tune in, is going to be all about editing student writing. As teachers, we have this need to fix and perfect our students' writing. And I'm going to talk about some strategies for making that a little bit easier, and just talk about what we should expect and maybe what we shouldn't expect. So I hope that these tips help to make your writing conferences a little bit more manageable. Bye.